our AACC website in the next few days, along with slides from today's presentation. In addition, AACC's website also has previous webinars along with resources from us and from colleges and systems around the country. And I highly encourage you to utilize those resources. And I'll put the link in the chat. And speaking of the chat, we ask if you have questions, please don't put them in the chat. Please put them in the Q&A section. Today's session does include time for questions and answers. And again, we're requesting you put any of those questions in the Q&A section. Those that can be answered easily will be done as we move forward in the webinar, and the rest we will be doing as many as we can live at the end of the session. And with that, I am happy to turn it over to AACC's President and CEO, Dr. Darion Pollard, to bring us up to speed on the state of workforce Pell implementation.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Parham, and good afternoon to each of you. Absolutely delighted to be here. I thank you. I know that this is always a busy season, so I'm so grateful to see each of you who are a part of this. I've had the pleasure of late to visit multiple states to hear about how things are rolling and the questions people have. I most recently just got back from California, where I was lucky enough to join the Association of California Community College Administrators, and we had a very rich conversation about how important the work of administrators are in this work, and more importantly, all the nuances that have to be responded to. Just this morning, I also was able to join a great conversation at the American Council on Education, where we talked quite a bit about community college as both a public good and a private good, and how that is a manifestation of our mission, and more importantly, how we are working to really protect the nation in a way that folks are really starting to recognize. I'll mention another phrase that came up today in today's conversation, which was radical collaboration. And I love this expression because I think Workforce Pell is really the manifestation of that. It's one of the challenges also that we're seeing because we're having to collaborate with different types of entities, businesses, state leadership, chambers of commerce, our students, our own institutional processes around many of the different functions that will allow us to actualize Workforce Pell. Even within our institutions, it could be challenging for us regarding our labels of credit and non-credit or different iterations of that. But I think Workforce Pell is the right incentive to get us to actually grapple with some of these decision points and to then move into a different space. I'm here and excited about the idea of radical collaboration because it's the language I think that will resonate with many people as we move and march closer to July 1. Finally, I really want to also amplify during last month or earlier this month when we had the National Legislative Summit, when we heard Undersecretary Kent recently praise community colleges during his opening keynote. He called our institutions, quote, well-respected and outcome-driven institutions, end quote. And he mentioned that the administration was very eager to, quote, put resources behind us. He also reaffirmed that the administration will be ready on July 1 to approve eligible programs. So we find that both reassuring, but also inspirational so that we can get the work done that we need to do. So I know that you're all excited and eager to hear about the best institutional and state practices. So I'm going to hand it off to David Boehm, who's going to continue our conversation here today. And again, thank you for choosing to be with us, all 200 of you who are right now on the call. Take care.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Pollard. I'm David Boehm, Senior Vice President for Government Relations here at AACC. Again, thanks so many of you for being with us this afternoon. This afternoon's presentation is going to be a little bit different than the series of webinars we've done on Workforce Pell, in that we are focusing on implementation of the program at the state and the campus level to try to give our members a bit of a sense about what institutions are doing by way of getting up to speed in this area. And as you know, Dr. Pollard just talked about the radical collaboration, across organizations. There's a lot of radical internal collaboration, I'd say, to just extend the metaphor a little bit or description on campuses, because the Workforce Pell involves the workforce programs themselves. It involves the student financial aid offices. It involves the registrars. in the IR offices. It involves external affairs offices and relating to businesses, and of course, government officials as well. So all those are pieces and facets of implementation of Workforce Pell. Just a couple things about status and what we're doing here at AACC on behalf of our institutions in this space and related ones. First thing is something that's not directly related to the Workforce Pell, but I feel obliged to mention it to our members, and that is the overall financial status of the Pell Grant program. We're going to be putting in our CC Community College Daily in a day or two a brief account of where we are in terms of financing this program. And all of you who care about this critical lifeblood financial support for our students, which is hopefully everyone, has to recognize that the program has shifted from a surplus mode to a deficit mode as we look forward, and there are going to be some intensive lobbying efforts that are going to be necessary in order to preserve the funding for that program and avoid program cuts. And most of you will remember the proposals that were passed by the House last summer that would have decimated a substantial portion of our Pell population. So we do want you to keep your eyes on the ball of financing Pell and the need for advocacy in that area. In terms of the status of the Workforce Pell regulations, we did a webinar a little over a month ago where we talked about the outcome of the Workforce Pell Negotiated Rulemaking Committee, on which Tanja Williams from St. Petersburg College, Dr. Williams was our representative. We're not going to go into detail on those regulations today. A summary of those regs is up on the AACC website. The main thing from our point of view at this moment is that the regulations are over at the Office of Management and Budget, which means that they are close to being published in a formal proposed rulemaking form, at which point in time AACC will be commenting on those regulations. We don't expect many changes to be made to them because there was consensus in the rulemaking process as the negotiations were undertaken back in December. However, there are going to be some adjustments that we're going to be seeking, and we will want your help in hopefully encouraging and persuading the Department of Education to make some not hugely important, but nevertheless significant changes in our direction. I won't take time this afternoon to go into that. Just before I ask Jim to introduce our panelists and for them to give their presentations, I just wanted also to let our members know about some of the things that we're monitoring right now in terms of what's going on for implementation. And you're going to hear a lot this afternoon, and you've heard a lot about the state role. The states really do have a very high degree of involvement and authority leverage over the process of approval of your Workforce Pell programs. They've been just assigned more responsibility from these proposed rules as we anticipate them than what the legislation itself might have suggested. And so the states are going to have to develop capacities in some areas where they may not necessarily have had it, in terms of examining the credit, how your non-credit programs articulate or transfer and accepted into credit programs, how the states are going to work with institutions to develop the data that will be used to document that programs have a 70% completion rate and a 70% placement rate. Also, states are going to have to develop standards for and articulate how they're justifying high skills, high wage, and in-demand programs. So all those things are areas where the states have to, if they don't, again, already have that capacity, develop it in very short order. I should mention also quickly that although the program starts, as Dr. Pollard just mentioned, on July 1, that it's not as if that's really a deadline. That's the starting gun for the program. And so if your programs aren't approved by then, you have the foreseeable future to make them eligible. But we do believe it is highly important for our colleges to be engaged right now with relevant state bodies, as you'll hear, to shape the approval process in ways that advantage our campuses. Couple other things. We are watching some state legislatures which are undertaking policy changes, bills in this area that would structure the approval of workforce Pell. We've heard about that from a number of states, so we know that's very important, something we'd be interested in hearing from you about. And then related to that is the interaction of the workforce Pell to state policies, which is also important area where hopefully the states working with institutions and legislators will enable institutions to leverage and braid the federal support with state support. As you know, many states are already involved to at least some extent in supporting short-term programs. So we expect the regulation to be published by the department formally in proposed rule in the very near future, and then ACC will likely have 30 days to comment on those regulations. Again, we'll ask for your help in reinforcing our message on those. So that's a little bit of the overall landscape in terms of what we're thinking about in Workforce Pell. And I'd like to turn things over now to my colleague Jim Hermes, our Associate Vice President for Government Relations, to introduce our panelists and kick off the substance of this afternoon's program. And thanks again, everybody.
Thanks very much, David. And just one point I'd add to both the remarks of Dr. Pollard and David in terms of the administration's support for this program is the fact that they are actually putting money behind it as well. We have the recent introduction of the Strengthening Community College Training Grants program competition that is focused on preparation of workforce Pell programs, and that comes on top of the FIPSI money that was released earlier. And then we was strongly hinted at the National Legislative Summit that the next iteration of the SCTG program would also be focused in this area as well. So, as David mentioned, I'm going to introduce today's panelists, and then we'll get to them, and then we'll try to leave plenty of time for Q&A at the end. But please enter your questions into the Q&A box at any time. So we've had many discussions over these months with members of ours in terms of what they're doing, what's happening at the institutional and state level in terms of preparing for a workforce Pell. And today we have folks from three states and institutions that kind of really impressed us with things that they're working on and what's going on. So first, we're going to hear from Nate McKinnon. He's the executive director of the Massachusetts Association of Community Colleges. And next, we'll hear from Layla Merrifield, who's president of the Wisconsin Technical College System, both of whom we work very closely with through the National Council of State Directors of Community Colleges. And then finally, we'll hear from Tammy Green, who's the executive director of statewide initiatives at Metropolitan Community College in Nebraska. And she's going to tag team it with Katie Thurber, who's a commissioner with the Nebraska Department of Labor. I had the pleasure of visiting Metropolitan in November and was very impressed with the stuff that they were doing, 3 months ago. So I'm very interested to hear, what's been going on even more recently. So without further ado, I'm going to get into the most nerve-wracking part of any webinar, and that is screen sharing. And then we'll kick it off. And for good reason. I don't actually see okay, hold on one second. Why are you not showing up? Oh, there it is. Okay, so Nate, we'll turn it over to you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I'm going to keep my video off, Jim. It's for everyone's benefit anyways. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nate McKinnon and the Massachusetts Association of Community Colleges, and delighted to have been asked to talk to you just a bit about what's happening in Massachusetts. And so thank you to Dr. Pollard and to David and Jim and the team at AACC for the invitation to be here today. We are very excited. If you can go to the next slide, Jim. It became clear here in the Commonwealth, we have, first of all, just some structural things, right? Decentralized system of community colleges here. Each institution has its own board and president that the president reports to the board. I think that's important just from a structural perspective to understand how this might contextualize for other states. But it became clear that as we looked at the workforce Pell legislation, a lot of opportunities for entities besides community colleges to really get involved in this work. The irony there is I feel like the burden pushed to get this over the finish line very much was done by all of us at community colleges. And so knowing that there's people who see dollar signs here outside of the community college space, be sure that we were not only part of the conversation, but at the table. And so we have a two-pronged approach that we've employed here in the Commonwealth. Um, and basically, that is, we built a statewide interagency workforce Pell committee. That was at our encouraging Secretary of Education's office, as well as the State Secretary of Labor and Workforce Development's office. We pointed out very early on that states have, and governors in particular, have a strong role, and that there needed to be strong coordination between education, labor, and workforce development. And so we built and led by the Executive Office of Labor and Workforce Development, a statewide interagency workforce Pell committee. That committee is meeting every single week, every single Friday, starting in December. Community College Workforce Pell Working Group. That includes a single rep.
Hey, Nate, this is Martha. Sorry to interrupt, but you are cutting out. Your microphone is cutting out. So if
Oh,
you can please see what you can do with a different mic or
it's my internet. Can you hear me?
no, it's still happening.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. And no. Um,
Hey,
Jim, can we go ahead and go to the next speaker until we can get Nate's microphone working? Is that possible?
Yeah, sure. We'll do that. Hold on one second.
Sorry, everyone. Give us a brief moment for technical difficulties.
Okay, we're going to turn it over now to Layla Merrifield from Wisconsin.
Okay, super. So here in Wisconsin, I think Nate is absolutely right. It's important to contextualize within each state. All of us will have slightly different structures. Here in Wisconsin, we have a true system of 16 comprehensive community and technical colleges across the state. We have a shared governance model with a system board that oversees and collaborates with those 16 colleges locally. Here in Wisconsin, we do not have a Department of Higher Education, so the WTCS office would fill that role for these purposes. So statewide, because we are a technical college system, we have around 500 programs. We are heavily occupational, with transfer degrees as a much smaller portion of our mission, an important part, but a smaller portion. We offer a variety at all 16 colleges of short-term technical diplomas, certificates, as well as all 16 colleges are engaged in related classroom instruction for apprenticeship. So we feel that our system is very well placed to implement Workforce Pell. Next slide, Jim. So because we are a true system, we have a number of strengths and quite a lot of infrastructure already in place that we are certainly trying to leverage as much as possible and not sort of reinvent the wheel when it comes to Workforce Pell. Our programs, as I mentioned, have some strong foundations. Each program in this system is industry aligned. Each program has a program advisory board of local employers that inform the curriculum. And each one is tied specifically to labor market outcomes in a specific SOC code. So all of that is already in place. We also regularly measure our graduate outcomes in terms of employment and wages, down to the individual program level, and we report that out each year, as well as using things like Lightcast, BLS data, UI wage data. So all of those systems are up and running already. We also have some formalized partnerships that are already in place. So, for example, the Secretary of Workforce Development in the state sits on my board. I sit on her board. We also have, for example, the governor appoints members both of my board and that Council on Workforce Investment. So we're just very closely tied together. We collaborate to run registered apprenticeship in this state. So when Workforce Pell was passed and we got through the negotiated rulemaking process, we, much as Nate mentioned, we immediately went to DWD and initiated a statewide working group for WTCS representatives and staff at Workforce Development to begin the process of agreeing upon a formalized approval process that we believe will move through the Governor's Council on Workforce Investment, which is our WIOA board here in Wisconsin, and rely upon a collaboration between DWD and WTCS. We have graciously now also permitted our four-year partners to join us in that work now that we have iterated that initial draft process a couple of times. We meet biweekly, and we expect that will continue indefinitely. We're also participating in a working group convened by the National Governors Association at our governor's office request, which is certainly also another helpful source of convening with our fellows around the country to think about and share ideas as we all move through this implementation process together. Here in Wisconsin, we are deeply invested in a career pathways system and model, and our programs are already structured and aligned in that way. So our programs, our short-term credentials, all of that infrastructure is already in place that those credentials would embed and lead into, articulate into the next highest level or credential. So again, we feel strongly that we're set up well. I'll also mention that we have a pretty robust course curriculum and program platform here in Wisconsin that lives here at the system office, but that has all of our state-approved programs already within it. And so we have leveraged that system to do an initial identification on behalf of our colleges for programs that we feel are either already compliant for Workforce Pell, or they're pretty darn close, or we think they're not compliant but possibly could be. And we have partnered with our colleges, of course, to have them prioritize based on that data. So I think having that sort of common template has been really helpful to cut out some of the initial legwork on behalf of our colleges to identify what their universe is. And allow them to begin prioritizing as institutions. What do we value most? What do we think is the biggest priority? Our top 3 programs, whatever it is, to begin down this road as we look at initial approval. Jim, you can go to the next slide. Obviously, we don't expect federal regulations, I don't think, until July 1. I would love to get them sooner as we are developing this process. But even knowing that we're likely to wait a while longer on Department of Education regulations, I encourage us all to go ahead and move down the road in terms of formalizing your processes. I'm very hopeful that we won't have to do too much tweaking when the final regulations are released. But I think it's important that we don't wait for the department and all of us sort of start thinking through our own processes and getting our program lists together. I do think that based on state level realities and who here in Wisconsin executes this work versus what is sort of contemplated in the regulations and Workforce Pell legislation, I think I would encourage us all to just have those conversations with your partners earlier rather than later, and think through from a practical standpoint who's going to be executing this work and how you're going to get it done. I think the regulation, the negotiated rulemaking certainly indicated a heavy role for the governor's office. Here, at least here in Wisconsin, the governor's office consists of a relative handful of people, and higher education is not necessarily their stock and trade. So connecting immediately with the governor's office and having a direct conduit between that statewide working group and the governor's office, I think is another sort of best practice that will just smooth the way for all of us as we move forward. Again, having a communication plan that's going to be consistent statewide is something that we are certainly advocating for as WTCS, particularly with our four-year partners, to make sure that we're all on the same page and that our stakeholders understand the steps that are required before workforce Pell Grants can be distributed, that eligibility criteria have been clearly communicated to institutions in each system, but also our students, our financial aid managers, and our statewide leaders, as well as our community groups and others, all understand and that we have a comprehensive communications plan so that everyone's on the same page and there's not sort of confusion sowed in our communities around what is going to be eligible for workforce Pell and what is not. I think it's also important, and I would encourage all of us to really have some conversations around the terms that are being used in federal legislation, and just ensure that we've had those collaborative discussions up front, and we have formalized the definitions of what we mean by in-demand programs, how we're going to measure wages, ensure that that value-added earnings and other sort of key terms. I think sometimes it's quite clear to those of us working in higher education what we mean by a stackable credential. It might not be obvious for our partners at a workforce development agency exactly what a stackable credential is. And so laying out those definitions in layman's terms and getting everyone's buy-in, I think is some of the work that we're prioritizing right now and developing sort of a glossary of shared terms. Okay, next slide, Jim. Moving through, so other tasks at hand. Again, I'd mentioned the program template. For us, this is a relatively simple tool that our office developed right away and shared out to all of our sort of chief academic officers or whoever at our colleges is sort of leading the workforce Pell implementation plan locally. Getting that to them right away. Again, we pre-populated then and that in order to cut down on legwork from their end. But then we're really facilitating those discussions statewide so that all of our colleges are communicating with one another about what are we going to prioritize. We have some clear programs that are pretty far down the road. CDL is one, commercial driver's license. I think that is one that a majority of our colleges offer currently. And it checks all of the boxes that are in legislation for workforce Pell. And so that is because we can identify those sorts of commonalities relatively easily with a centralized system. We can then work towards a list of sort of pilot programs that we want to run through this system really early on, and convening the colleges to sort of agree on those programs. I think makes a lot of sense so that we can all sort of work out the kinks together. Again, formalizing those common definitions and then your sources of truth. We have advocated that our graduate outcomes report, because we feel strongly that that's a good source of data, that be included in these approval processes. Again, making sure that things like program age, that we have a common source of understanding. What does it mean that your program is 12 months, at least 12 months old? Well, measuring from what date to what date, and can we all agree that a program that, for example, the curriculum might be updated on a yearly basis, incorporating the input of our industry partners, but that we would advocate that does not reset the clock, right? That is not a new program just because the curriculum's been updated. But again, I think you have these discussions up front with your DWD or your workforce partners in your governor's office, and ensure that we're all understanding these things the same way. And then, of course, we continue to look for opportunities where we can build upon or borrow from definitions that we already have in place within our system, and really drive this discussion and put this program approval process together in a way that we feel really works for technical colleges. And you know, our four-year partners, I think, have a very different process, but particularly for Workforce Pell, we feel that our process makes the most sense. We have a robust program approval process that already incorporates, for example, labor market data, BLS data, Lightcast data, and we would expect and advocate that that is the process that is used to develop these programs going forward. So I think we are a couple of iterations into our draft approval process at this point. We will continue to iterate that process and document each step. I think our next steps also include thinking about how to integrate some of our data systems. Right now, we have really robust systems within the WTCS, and our workforce development partners have pretty robust UI wage data, Wisconomy, some other labor market information. And so marrying those two, or at least ensuring that they are complementing one another and providing a robust data set around each eligible program. It is our expectation that we will then have a very smooth process, we hope, when we submit these programs to the Department of Education. So that is where we are in Wisconsin, and to be very, very brief. And yeah, we're excited to get moving with these programs, and I think we are leaning towards, at this point, identifying a relative handful of programs that would sort of be our pilots, and would go through that initial phase in 2026 to identify some sticking points and work through those and resolve those prior to a larger scale approval process in the following years. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Layla. We're going to turn it back over to Nate now.
Can you hear me okay, Jim?
I can.
Great. Sorry about that, everybody. We had 2.5 feet of snow here, and I thought the internet problems were fixed, but apparently they're not. So I'm on my phone. Just to close on this, we created a separate group with our Massachusetts colleges, one person from each college. The goal here is that's the group that's going to talk through implementing at the colleges, and it's our office's job to sit on the statewide interagency committee and translate back to the institutions what's happening and what they need to do to be ready to get their programs aligned. So we're really here as both a translator and a convener at the institutional level, but also representing the colleges at the statewide interagency level. I'd point out that we're the only educational training entity at that statewide committee, which is helpful as well. If you can go to the next slide, please, Jim. So at the state level, we actually have a charter, and we were able to finalize that, and it's a chartered structure. There's clearly defined roles between the state entities, our office included. There's a shared accountability and responsibility. There's now working very much on stakeholder engagement communications. We have 5 work streams that are underway: governance and coordination, the stakeholder engagement, a 2026 pilot, and then the 2028 scale plan as well. Labor market aligned eligibility criteria, and compliance reporting and technology infrastructure, which are all outlined here. I'm not going to go through them in details, but this is the work streams that we're currently looking at through that statewide structure. Again, this is all in partnership with our Executive Office of Labor and Workforce Development, as well as the Executive Office of Education and other like entities. So we're currently trying to do as much as we can with the state to not overburden the institutions directly in figuring out what they'll need to do, as there's enough to do at the institutional level to be ready for this. Next slide, please, Jim. So this is just an overview of our year one versus longer term. And we really worked here with our state partners to recognize that we want to have, by July, something on the Secretary of Education's desk for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for programs to be approved. And we didn't want perfect to be the enemy of great. And so what we decided was that we wanted to start with a pilot strategy by having a limited set of programs that are proven already, that have a strong historical completion and placement rate, that align with WIO and Perkins, are stackable, with a prioritization for registered apprenticeship programs that are aligned for that as well. So that is where our low-hanging fruit is right now, to be able to sort of say, let's start here before we try and open it to everything, so that we can use that opportunity to test the workflows, to look at how the governor's approval process can be streamlined, as opposed to, and we get the data transmission, the data on the back end for placement and completion, and the reporting all aligned at the beginning. Our fear was, if we just said, here's how it will work, and everything that you can possibly think of that would possibly apply for workforce Pell eligibility, throw it at the state that's never gone through this type of process, and somehow it'll come out the other end. We just saw this huge funnel with a very narrow opening, and we wanted to narrow that in partnership with the Commonwealth. And we're so appreciative to our governor and her team for recognizing that we want to work together on this and move forward in a more collaborative process. And so that's how we got to a narrow pilot. Next slide, please. So I think this is something, a lesson from us to our colleague community college folks around the country, is having a coordinated structure with your state leadership and being at the table really does matter. It's going to reduce confusion later. It's going to have, having strategies that can reduce what the institutions are expected to do. That feedback and continuous loop of the state to the institutions back to the state, both from a policy and an operational perspective, is really important. And we are realizing now there's a lot of new complexities coming in here, an eligibility review process that's never been done by the state, thinking about non-degrees and industry recognized credentials. Part of this is dealing with our state SHIO has always been in the world of certificates and degrees only, and left us alone in our non-credit space. So bringing them along with us on the work we have been doing, and our labor and workforce development folks get that, but they don't get the financial aid side. So it's really the opportunity to marry the two together. And we found this very helpful through a statewide coordinated structure that if you have an opportunity to either create, or if it's already created, to dive in and get yourself at the table, I think would be very helpful. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned before, the other aspect is that we have our own community college working group. We have one person from each institution. It's not the same type of person at each institution, so that we have a diverse set of perspectives around the table. That includes a chief academic officer, a workforce leader, a financial aid director, and an enrollment intake person. So trying to make sure that there is a key point of contact at each institution who will be responsible for conveying information back to each of our colleges, but also can help us think through challenges as they arise. We've used this model with other major policy implementations and find it very helpful. We had already been working on a non-credit workforce data project, and so that helped us a lot. And so we're now able to use that and push that forward. It helped us in immense ways in terms of already thinking through the data we don't have that we need to have from non-credit programming in particular. And so now we're able to have this project to standardize our definition, align clock hour to credit equivalency, something we've not done here in Massachusetts. Other states have, but that's something we have not really done prior to this work. Map the programs to our high demand sectors and possible credit pathways beyond non-credit, And so we're really excited about this and see it as something that's going to help all of our non-credit programs, not just for workforce Pell readiness, but for our overall data collection on this. And so we're thrilled that we participated in a non-credit mobility academy, and that has laid some groundwork here. And I think there's a good model on that alone for states that don't have much data in this space. That could be a whole separate webinar, but it's helped us to try and use that to make sure our data moves forward well. Next slide, please. So just to recap here from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts perspective, we're doing a phased rollout, and we are trying to make sure that there's a centralized reporting aspect to this. We're using the governance that we've put together with our two secretariats and that the governor has tasked with leading this. I would point out that one of them, as part of this project, has engaged an outside consultant just as a project manager to help keep the trains on track. If your states have resources to do that, we have found it incredibly helpful, as typically a capacity in labor and workforce development offices that oversee WIOA and other things like that is not something that's just lying around. So increasing capacity in those spaces to think through this process has been very helpful from our perspective. And then aligning on the reporting, we're really excited about the opportunity to really have apprenticeship be at front and center on this as we move forward with the state, and looking at how do we make sure that apprenticeship is not only part of the conversation, but leading the conversation in many ways, given the opportunities around that, both in our state with our governor's goals, as well as the federal administration's goals and resources that are available for that. And then lastly, how do we make sure that we make this sustainable for the institutions, not burdensome, and find ways to reduce the work that they need to do, knowing that there's enough going on at each of our community colleges already, and that we want Workforce Pell to be value add at the end of the day, not only for the students, but for the colleges as well. And that's really what we've been focusing on. I believe that is the end of our, is that my last slide? Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much for having me. Sorry about the technical glitch earlier, and looking forward to the rest of the conversation.
Thanks, Nate. Great stuff from Massachusetts. Good luck digging out. We're going to head back to the Midwest now in Nebraska with Tammy and Katie, and I'm going to find there. There we go. Tammy?
So sorry about that. I think I also experienced technical difficulties there for a quick moment. Um, Again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Tammy Green. I am the Executive Director for Statewide Workforce Initiatives. And then I have the privilege of having Commissioner Thurber here as well, with a hope of understanding that really to develop this, it really is a collaborative effort. And I think Dr. Pollard put it very nicely when she said this is radical collaboration. And in many ways, I think it's also transitioning in some ways over to competitive collaboration. So historically, if we viewed ourselves as competitors in the past, I think that time under Workforce Pell has disappeared. There are, just because I want to make sure that we're able to, get to some of the questions, and to also make sure that Commissioner Thurber has an opportunity to share what is going on from a Department of Labor and a state perspective, and also what's going on from a community college perspective. I think one thing to mention is that what this has brought about is really a shift in our strategic mindsets. It's not about funding change, it's a systemic transformation. It breaks down silos and creates credit to non-credit. It expands equity and workforce readiness in ways that historically I don't know if we've really identified as a need, and it requires technology, culture, and process shifts within our community college system and throughout the state. Next slide, please. Like I said,
As you all know, it is a game changer for community colleges. In three main ways, it equalizes the playing field, at least from our perspective, by making high quality short-term programs eligible for federal aid, with the goal of opening doors for underserved populations. It also shifts and transforms our work by integrating non-credit and credit systems together. And that is a massive shift within our community colleges that we are seeing and needing to happen. How do you transcript a non-credit program, and how do you make sure there's credit equate, and how do you exist in the same system if you have a non-credit data system that exists alongside a credit data system? So it is also removing financial barriers. And it is really transforming the way that we look at continuing education. Definitely here in the state of Nebraska, but I'm hearing that it's a transformative process throughout our nation. Next slide, please. I'm going to go through this. There's just a few things that we are really in line with launching by July 1, with at least piloting a few programs, because we have already we use some of our workforce dollars to be able to pilot what it would look like and what a workforce Pell system could look like. And that has helped us quite a bit. Also, the two percentages and the two performance benchmarks that I think are key to a lot of the work we're doing is 70% completion rate, 70% job placement rate. What does that look like in an ecosystem that may not have historically had to have those kinds of performance benchmarks? Next slide. And I'm going to fast forward next slide because I want Commissioner Thurber to have a moment to speak. One thing that I also wanted to touch base on, because this will lead into how we have really aligned the work between our non-credit and our credit programs, to where now we're just calling them programs, right? So credit for prior learning is one thing that we had to focus on. How do we do a credit equate? And then how do we identify credit hour by contact hour or clock hour? How does all of that work? Is one thing that we're focused on. And what we created internally is a workforce Pell charter group that is made of our cross departments of subject matter experts and leaders here within the community college, because each one of them looks at each one of these aspects differently. So I would encourage that concept of a charter group to focus on those different system alignments. Next slide. And so one of the things that we really focused on was internal readiness within our community college, external coordination, which is absolutely essential, not only within our community college ecosystem, but also with our Department of Labor, our Department of Education, you know, changing some of our laws and get them to work better for us. And then also we looked at it from a student and a community aspect, or a community outreach perspective. Next slide. All right, and now I have the privilege of turning it over to our Department of Labor, our state commissioner, Commissioner Thurber.
Well, thank you for letting me crash. It's so nice to be here. I've had this role for just over a year now, and the relationship with the community colleges has been one of my favorite parts of the role. And being able to strengthen that partnership and connection in Nebraska has just been phenomenal. I loved the radical collaboration, and I love that Tammy even added the competition, because one of the pieces that I talk with employers regularly about is you might be competing, but if you go to the Latin of compete, it means to strive together. And so while you're fighting for the same people, you're also trying to do it to elevate Nebraska together. And I think Workforce Pell is a great example of how we could start to really elevate some of that workforce programming in a competitive but friendly environment that elevates states. Um, so when I started to dive into Workforce Pell, my first thought was, whoa, not my lane. But then my second thought was, how can we simplify it to make this work for everyone? And so we tried very hard to go through and build a very simplified process of where should the Labor Department step in and provide definition. I wholeheartedly agree. The words need defined. I love the idea of a glossary because we all speak slightly different languages when it comes to these terms, and they matter, and having everyone on the same page matters. So you can see on the slide where we are viewing it as NDOL should step in and really define what is going to happen. And then step in and where we view it as the training provider. When we first go live, it will most likely be just community colleges in Nebraska initially, and then we'll build longer. But what the training provider needs to be prepared to provide to us up front. Next slide. So we tried to map out what is needed and how this process flow will take place. We also have what I'll call an informal committee with no name, but it involves pretty much everyone across the state, from the community colleges, all of post-secondary, Department of Ed, and workforce. We have the workforce board under us at the Department of Labor. And so this is Nebraska's map. It will be different in every state as to how it will function, but we'll be the governor's designee for purposes of workforce Pell. And it'll start with an application coming to us. We will do an initial review and then try and allow training providers an opportunity to cure. We're not looking to just deny programs. We want to make this a success. And so how can we partner to make sure we have everything we need to get things approved? Then take it to our workforce development board under WIOA. And from there, it will go to the governor and be submitted to the Secretary of Ed. We're running really short on time though, so I do want to have questions. So next slide.
Actually, I think if we want to do one more next slide, this part of it that I wanted to share that has helped us at Metropolitan Community College is the way that we have created our stackables. So for those of you who are familiar with career and technical education, this aligns quite nicely with CTE programs and K-12. And our programs have all aligned along academic focus areas that align with the K-12 career and technical education programs. Next slide. And here, this diagram, not that you need to study it or memorize it, but what I want to share though is within each one of those academic focus areas, we have identified the right starting point. So we have really gotten very good at identifying what is our students' right starting point. And I'm going to give you an example. Next slide. And then we're going to do questions. This is an example of health professions within our within our community college. The community colleges throughout the state of Nebraska all operate WIOA Title II and the adult education programs. Those are the GED programs, English language learning programs. We have dual enrollment. So we've developed a tiered pathway approach all along the way that leads to jobs at each one of these levels. And so having that is a way that we have shown how students may start in a non-credit certification and credential program, or they may start in a credit credential program, but they are aligned to each other they stack upon each other, and they all align with industries. And I will leave you at that. And thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, all of you. Really great information from a few different states. We got a couple of minutes left. I see we have some questions in the well, now it's down there in the question queue. Um, and I'm just bringing them up now. And I'll just throw them out, and whoever has something to add to the question. Um, so the first one is this might be state specific, but aren't definitions based off of WIOA regulations, Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act? So any comments from our presenters in terms of how they're doing that in terms of alignment with the WIOA and specifically in the area of definitions?
I think I think yes and no. Yes, WIOA regs do inform your definitions, but I think there are some things that are going to be either slightly different state by state, or particularly with roles and responsibilities. I think those are often not specifically defined by the feds, and you'll want to think it through at a state level or local level. But yes, WIOA regs certainly inform this work as well. So it's complicated. Depends.
Tammy, Katie, Nate, anything to add?
I would
No,
just
we
oh, go ahead, Nate.
I was going to say we are our pilot in particular has alignment with both WIOA and Perkins in our state, so it's certainly part of the conversation.
And we're trying to align as much as possible. They use slightly different words in some spots, which makes it fun.
Thanks. And then looks like we have one other open question. Um, and that is, if you're just calling them programs, how are you planning to differentiate them from one another for the consumer? Um, and I think that maybe means between Workforce Pell and other programs, or between the programs themselves. Don't know
Yeah,
what to take a stab at that.
I'll start and hand it over to these guys. So the way that we typically so most of our programs are for credit. I should say that at the outset. What we do offer some non-credit programs, particularly in contract training and sort of incumbent training that is specific to the workplace. But for the most part, our open access programs are all going to be for credit, and they're all going to be within a career pathway. They're going to be within an identified career cluster. And then we sort of differentiate from there and get specific from there. But I think that should be part of your communications plan for how you will communicate this to employers, communities, and students. I think that for the most part, Workforce Pell just opens up an opportunity to have another way to pay for these programs. But it's we sort of consider this part of our core work, and now our students will hopefully be helped on the cost side. But I'll hand it over to Nate and others.
Yeah, I would just add this particular issue has been something I've been pushing even prior to Workforce Pell being approved, which is trying to get rid of the term non-credit here, just because I don't know what else in the world you call something by what it's not. So we actually have been working with our SHIO on trying to redefine all of these into a bucket just called certificates, that if they lead to a credential of value in the workplace, that can be a certificate, and not necessarily need to worry about whether it was 27 credits or 540 clock hours. That doesn't matter if it's leading to employment. So I think this is a great point, and I agree with Layla's suggestion about really thinking through this as part of the communications to consumers as the rollouts continue in each state.
And Nate, I'm just going to kind of echo that as well. I think we're doing a lot to change the terminology that we use as well within our programs, and we just call them certifications. I think another thing that we have learned as well is for a long time, we were kind of coining some of those terms like micro credentials and things like that. And we were finding that that was creating confusion in our communities. And we're just looking at it as credentials and educational programs. The other reason we did not only go credit versus non-credit is for us, it came back to the student and the wraparound services, a lot of times that are embedded within our community college that are necessary and valuable to help us hit those completion rates because I know I run economic mobility programs that quite honestly, the work and the supports that go into hitting those 70% completion rate and 70% job placement rates do require those supportive opportunities for individuals in the form of career coaches and also in the form of, and this is in adult education, but it is integrated education and training. Those instructors actually help address any gaps in academic gaps for math and reasoning and language arts. So that's why we didn't just go credit.
Great. Thank you all. We're a little past our time, but we got one more open question. There were some questions also answered in the box, so check those out if you haven't seen those. But we'll wrap up with this one. And I think you've all touched on this to an extent, but if you have anything to add here, what will be the information source or sources that you all use to show that metrics have been met? The questioner knows that they have many potential sources of information, but anything you want to add? Panelists to that question.
I'll take a quick stab. We're working on developing using our state longitudinal data system and our unemployment data that we already have for wage data that all goes into. This is part of that statewide workforce group or statewide Pell group that I mentioned earlier, and there's an entire track just on the data piece, and so we're making really good progress on that. The key becomes standardized definitions in varying programs that have never really reported through IR before, particularly in non-credit training that's now qualifying.
Layla, our Nebraska team, anything to add?
Yeah, I think that so for us, that is kind of the core of some of the conversations we're having with our statewide working group, is determining what are our sources of information and what are we all going to agree that these are the metrics according to this source of information that this program must hit in order to be approved at the state level, submitted to the Department of Ed, and shows that robust evidence that I think the department will be looking for as they review programs. I think that, again, having those conversations, I think we in higher ed know that what we mean by completion is, within 150% of usual time, this person gets their credential, right? But you've got to have those. I would encourage us all to have those specific and clear conversations with these other stakeholders and make sure that workforce development or Department of Labor, whoever it is in your state, agrees that that is the appropriate metric and this is how we're going to measure that. I mean, we certainly have completion data at our institutions, right? But we want to make that as user-friendly as possible, both from our institution standpoint, so they're not sort of reinventing the wheel when they already know that they're tracking all of this completion data, but also from the standpoint of the governor's office / the Council on Workforce Investment, that they understand that when they get this report from Layla's office, that means that this program hit this metric and what underlies that. But again, it's one of those, sort of go slow to go fast, and having all of those conversations ahead of time.
Yeah, and I would just say from Nebraska's perspective, we're very aware we do not collect all the data elements in our current state that we need to truly get to where Workforce Pell wants us to get. So we're looking at it from what do we have now, so that we can implement starting July 1 and define it around that. And then what do we need to be building so that we can be ready once there's a 3-year gap to where the 180-day, that piece is a very big concern for our UI wage data. But we will align UI wage data with the community, well, with the education data. We have a longitudinal data system already that we're looking at utilizing and creating dashboards for the programs.
And I think it's a micro and a macro conversation too that our systems are having to align. I think within our community college and within our institutions, there's data alignment and data collection that we may need to shore up, especially for institutions that are using just credentials, whether they be credit or non-credit in those worlds. Um, so that, but also ensuring that the system that's happening at within the institution is connecting to the statewide system. So if we're using one data system at Metropolitan Community College and that is different than the system where the any work system that is the statewide system, how do we connect those two? Or do we? Those are big questions, but happening at both spectrums.
Thanks. And there was one more question I just typed an answer to, but just to be super clear, yes, workforce Pell programs can be non-credit programs. They're both non-credit and they're credit equivalent programs. So we know there's been sort of different information out there over the months on that issue, but it is very much settled now in terms of non-credit programs being eligible. I don't know if any of my AACC colleagues have anything they wanted to add before we close out, but we are 7 minutes past the hour. I want to really thank all of our panelists again for joining us. Some really great information from both the institutional and the state level, and hopefully it helped to those of you who have attended here today. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much
David?
for having us.
Just thanks to
Thank
everyone.
you.
All right, thanks everybody. We'll get the recording up on our website in the next few days. And please pay attention to your email, to our website, and to our social media to find out information about the next webinar that we look forward to seeing you there. Thanks all.